Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are using the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 340, Is Bliss Then Such Abyss? Now, this is a fascinating poem. Some have argued that this is proof that Emily was a remarkable integralist thinker, that notion of transcending and including, that we come to certain moments in our life when the certain positions that we hold, we no longer can hold them. And so we have to kind of transcend out of that position into another position, but we will continue to include parts of the previous stage theory. It's a very evolutionary kind of idea. Again, as we've said, an integralist position. Again, Emily is going to describe a process without actually naming what that process is, although she'll use the word bliss. It's amazing how the word bliss became such a popular word in the late 20th century and early 21st century. It's still a popular word today. Emily will love this word. She uses it in a number of her poems. Now, when this one was first published, it was in the New England Quarterly of 1947. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net. Down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments as well as our preceding 339 poems. We just finished with 339, I Tend My Flowers for Thee. If you have been reading through these poems, then you know that this kind of question about decision-making, should I do this, should I not? The Clash song, of course, comes to mind, should I stay or should I go? That for Emily, often, these decision moments are laden with all kinds of psychic baggage. To go, not to go. To cross, in this case, the abyss, not to cross will be central. Now, that is to say, there's a tension for Emily between the head and the way that I think rationally about a decision, and the heart, the way I think emotionally about the decision. And what's fascinating is that she gets her foot and her boot involved in it as well. So there's a certain kind of, sometimes I'm asked, give me an example of why Emily is an American poet. And here I'll comment on the idea of the boot. We think about, of course, Walt Whitman. If you, Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself 52. If you want to find me, look for me under your boot soles and all of that. Let's enjoy the poem. Is bliss then such abyss, I must not put my foot amiss for fear I spoil my shoe? I'd rather suit my foot than save my boot. For yet to buy another pair is possible at any store, but bliss is sold just once. The patent lost, none buy it anymore. Say foot, decide the point. The lady cross or not. Verdict, the boot. Exclamation point. Now, the fact that she moves from I to the lady makes this an interesting question. In other words, to take that step or not to take that step, especially if you are a lady. I think that layer is necessary to read this poem. She'll begin with bliss, which takes us, of course, back to poem 51. Again, you've already seen her use of it. In 39 poems, she uses this or a version of bliss. Then notice abyss, and the genius of the language here is remarkable. This takes us back to poem 291. She'll use this word abyss in 8 different poems, and it usually is structured the way Kierkegaard, for example, will talk about that uncertainty about taking that leap of faith across the abyss. Now, it's possible all she's talking about is stepping across some kind of stream or a creek or something that's going to get her boot wet or her feet wet. I must not put my foot amiss. Notice we go from abyss to amiss. For fear I spoil my shoe. And again, this is all a question. In other words, should I do this? Should I not do this? And now I'm thinking about the cost, the price that must be paid. Namely, I might spoil my shoe, right? I'd rather suit my foot, she says, than save my boot. In other words, my foot wants to go across the abyss or the creek or the river, whatever. Let's do it. For yet to buy another pair is possible. This will take us to poem 696, Acres of Perhaps, as we have argued. That is a great line in her poetry. At any store. In other words, I can always make this decision and come back and get another pair of boots. That's not a big problem for me. But, the word but, now we're back to bliss one more time, is sold just once. And I find this a fascinating line. Again, we call these series, Chats with Emily, because this would be a question we would love to ask Emily. What did you mean when you say bliss is sold just once? In other words, you're only happy once, or are you saying decisions that lead to bliss can only happen once? And of course, we think about Frost and his two roads diverged in a path. I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's very possible this poem stands behind that reflective poem. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net over it. And of course, let's say it out loud. Standing behind this poem are all of the journey poems that are the most famous, from Homer's Odyssey to Dante's Inferno. Of course, it comes to mind, or Dante's Divine Comedy, right? But bliss is sold just once. Notice the language of buying and selling, as we've commented in earlier poems. The patent lost, but none buy it anymore. In other words, once the decision is made, once the foot has the boot has been soiled, it's over. Say foot, decide the point. In other words, the foot in this seems to be the more ambitious. Let's go, let's go. Should I do this or not? And I think here the key words are lost in decide, right? Decide the point. The lady cross or not? And there it is, of course, right? By the way, notice it's the lady and not I. And then finally, she uses the word verdict, which only ends up in one other poem, 534. When we get there, we'll look back to her use of it here. Verdict, the boot, exclamation point. Now, a whole lot has been suggested about who wins in the end. Is it the boot that says, hey, let's not destroy our boot here. We'll not step across this abyss, whatever that is. And again, speaking metaphorically, it isn't totally clear what it is we're talking about. Are we talking about maybe, for example, a relationship? Are we talking about a process like trying to publish our poetry? Here's what we are saying. To reach bliss, you're going to have to cross a stream that might destroy your shoe, and therefore, always there's the question of, am I willing to transcend and include, to get out of this whatever position I'm in and make a decision, because every decision that I make unmakes in some ways other decisions, earlier decisions. At 2B, I love the word picture of crossing the abyss, and of course the word choice of abyss and amiss. That's brilliant. Now, the scholar Ruth Miller has actually seen this poem as a reflection back to poem 160. Emily, in that poem, you'll remember, is withdrawing from the possible bliss of death. In that poem, the escape from death was something that happened to her. Notice in this poem, it's Emily who is making the decision. Is it a love affair? Is it a decision to publish poetry? Whatever that is, it's not clear. Of course, at 3A, can't help but think of Hamlet's famous to be or not to be from Act 3. That is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing in them. We've given full lectures on that set of lines at learnstrong.net. And of course, Hegel comes to mind as well with his thesis, antithesis, synthesis paradigm. Finally, at 3B, to own a poem like this, what was a time in your life when you had to make the hard choice, and it was the dialectic, to use Hegel's term, between the foot and the boot? And to what degree are you able now to make kind of an observation or two about which one? Thank you.